Testing. Testing. Just getting this set up. Hang on a minute. Gonna find some music. Blah blah blah, testing audio levels with music in the background. Blah, testing audio levels with music in the background. Hang on, I didn't do that right. Blah blah blah, testing audio levels with music in the background. Hang on, I didn't do that right. Blah blah blah, testing audio levels with music in the background. Okay, that actually worked. It's a little weird. Anyway. Okay, so here's what I got so far. I've been working on this. I haven't done the hallways yet, just the set pieces. Set pieces are fun. Anyway, the gist of it is you start with a hallway with warm lighting to introduce you to the just the tone of the level so far, with some shadows with the pillars and stuff. There might be an encounter in this room, I'm not sure, but just to set it up in case there is one, and make sure that there are adequate shadows. That's something you want to keep in mind with Skyrim, is when you're building encounters, you have to make sure that stealth players have avenues to success. So this whole thing can't be lit up uniformly. I don't have this as a basic light, it's a shadow light. If I transform this into a basic light, it lights up the whole room, and stealth players have nowhere to hide because your sneak is influenced by light level. So, moving on, the idea here is standing through this doorway, you see a flickering warm light around the corner. Then you go around the corner, and that's when you step into hell here. This is going to be an encounter with 3 flame Atronachs. Not sure exactly where I'm going to put them, but the basic idea is that it's going to be a pain in the ass for melee players just because of the hazard floor, the fact they have to hop across the rocks or across the platforms to get over here, but there's going to be a way to deal with them. The pillars provide cover, so flame Atronachs don't have a melee attack, I don't think. They just have firebolts, so you can use these as you're running around to use them as cover, basically. Get to the other end of the room. Another hallway that shows you the transition between warm lighting to cold lighting. There was a blue light here. But basically, it's going to be a transition between hot to cold. Go through this door. What you see is another encounter. The idea behind this one is this guy hits really hard. So he's a pain in the ass for ranged players, because if you want to kite him, like you should be, there's going to be traps all over the floor that cause icicles to fall from the ceiling. They're not, these icicles, they're ice spikes, the spell ice spike that come from the ceiling, but I'm going to make it look like it's icicles. This whole thing's going to have tons of them. It's going to be interesting to do that, though, without oversaturating the ceiling with the same models and stuff. Because right now it looks good. It's sparingly used, but it makes sense where they are. But in order for the traps to be believable with where the spikes are coming from, I'll either have to add a lot more fog to hide the ceiling from the player, or be a lot more careful of where I put the icicles that are visible, and make sure that there's enough of a challenge. But yeah, basically this guy spawns in a whirlwind going up, and then he comes down, or you can go up to meet him if you're a melee player. If you're melee, this previous room with the fire and everything was a pain in the ass, so it's kind of a freebie in terms of strategy. You just go up and wail on him. There's only one of him. It's simple. So the third set piece I'm going to build is after another hallway that transitions between cold and just stark white lighting. You're going to head into a cave area with a free exit here. And I didn't scan this or take a picture of it, but basically what I got is the Storm Atronach encounter is going to take place on a giant temple. It's going to be a spiraling pyramid. So stairs are going to help you get up each level of the pyramid until you get to the top, and then you walk across a walkway to this exit right here. So this is what I'm going to be doing for the next hour or so. Building this temple out of facade pieces. I'm going to turn this music down a little bit. Okay. Okay, so first I need to figure out what I need. So I'm going to go and preview everything. All these pieces. I need to find pieces that let me build platforms. That's a tower. No, more tower pieces. Here we go. Platform pieces. A lot of these are invisible because they're not turned around. Or they're below the level of the floor. That too. Okay, we're getting somewhere. We have walls. So we're going to build the first level of the pyramid. Now these are big pieces, so I want to make sure that snapping is on a larger size than 32 pixels. So let's go with 128. Apply that, and things move around much easier. Oops, didn't want to move that though. Also, to reduce eye strain, let's add light. This area is going to be a bright white light. What the actual source of the light's going to be, though, is lightning bolts. This temple is going to be attracting lightning from the distant walls of the cave. There's going to be a lot of fog, and it's going to conceal the edges of the cave when you're on the temples to reduce the "why the hell is this happening" effect of lightning coming from rocks, basically. So this first level is going to be pretty low to the ground. The ground itself is weird. It's not level. That's because it's actually ceiling tiles. All the floor tiles in the cave set, they're either way too small or they don't connect properly, or I haven't figured them out. So I'm using ceiling tiles and we'll just go with it. As long as the temple itself is pretty clean and not messed up looking, I'm okay with the cave being rough and ruined looking. The idea behind this particular floor of the dungeon is that it's actually a temple made by Peryite's followers. Peryite is a Daedric prince in the game, and like most of the princes, they're self-obsessed, and they basically, if a player is going through their house, they want their house to look nice, which is why this area is mostly kept up. It's not like a bunch of ruins everywhere. Some messed up floor pieces, but that's about it. For the most part, this temple looks like it's actively, used or followed. So to keep up with that theme, there are 3 parts that of the theme they need to do with each room. That is, it needs to be elemental with the Atronachs. So I've got fire, ice, I'm going to have storm here. I've got that covered with lightning bolts and everything. Needs to have some element of regality or nobility, and that's covered by the fact that it's a temple. There's going to be pillars and things. The common theme, I have these pillars right here that actually come from Skyhaven. I just like the texture. They look nice and they kind of fit in with the aesthetic of this area. So I'm going to use those again just for familiarity for the player. And the third aspect that I'm going to be using for each of these rooms is reality breaking, because as you go deeper in the dungeon, you're getting closer to oblivion. So reality needs to be slowly tearing away. I've got that base covered here in this fire room with the pillars like coming out of the walls at odd angles, look, and the chains and everything. It looks very irregular, but kind of an intentional way. The ice section, I'm not sure I'm going to do, but it's not complete. There needs to be some aspect of this that screams things aren't right here. If I can get the lights to work in the game as they do now, the flickering and everything like that, it looks kind of eerie, and that might suffice. But as of right now, when I load up the game, this particular type of light, the shimmering effect, doesn't appear. So if I can get that working, we'll see. Otherwise, that won't be complete. I'll need to think of something else to augment the unnatural theme. Okay, so we're gonna have this temple here. It's big enough that I could probably use 2 of these pieces. Yeah. It's gonna get smaller as I get toward the top, so I need to leave room for shrinking. Because I don't want the area that the player is standing on to become so small that there's nowhere to stand on or fight on, because there will be encounters in this room. Okay, that's about centered. Need to leave room for stairs to come out. Also need to leave room for corners. In fact, I should take one of these out because the corners will add that room. Oop, that's an in corner. We need an out corner. That's far too small. Okay. There's a problem with the creation kit where things aren't rotating like they should. It's very annoying. Basically, it means that they won't rotate a certain direction. I have to rotate them the other direction to get where they need to go. Kind of like Zoolander. Okay, so we're going to copy paste that bitch. Flip it around. See, this is a stupid bug happening. I thought it might have been my mouse like sticking or flickering, but no, it's actually a creation kit. It's okay though. If I eventually want to get a job doing this, like I want to, part of what makes you a good just worker in general is dealing with things when they don't work right. So I could bitch and moan, but you just got to work with it. Bitching and moaning doesn't do anything. Okay, so now we have this outermost layer here. We'll add some free stairs. See, well, frickin', there we go. Let's make sure they're centered. That's about right. Okay, now let's add the next level. I want this to be fairly tall. It needs to reach up to that exit. And I was thinking maybe 3 levels. So we need to go a little bit higher, don't we? There we go. That looks kind of nice because right here, these pillars just kind of go right into the floor, but if you move one more chunk up, it looks a little bit better, more less of a weird cutoff. I could maybe even make it better by moving it like that, but for now let's leave the snapping on. Okay. That looks good. Just putting down Legos, that's all it is. Okay, so we have a bit of a gap here. Looking for, let's see, that's platform big wall 1. Let's see if platform big wall 2 is smaller, and it is. So all I gotta do is, because I got this Z fighting thing right here, where two textures are on top of each other, so I can't hide it like that. This is an interesting problem. I'll just have to resize this. Let's see how much we need to push it out by. We need to push it out by that much. Nope, a little bit farther. There we go. Now it looks right. But it's too wide. And even if I center it, there's not going to be enough room for the player to move. So I need to take out this big wall. Let's move these in closer. Add another small piece, and we'll see how well it fits. There's still a gap. So let's see if we move it in. The important thing is to make sure there's no seam right here, obviously. The player can't fall through, so let's select the whole thing, or as much as we can, and center it this way. And the seam's covered, so that works out. I'm afraid that things are going to get pretty small and hard to maneuver around when the player reaches the top, but we'll get to that when we get there. We might be okay. Okay, so we have this second level built. Now let's start with 4 corners and go from there. We have the same height, and we're not quite reaching the top here, although we almost do. Actually, that should be fine because we can simply have the ramp leading to the exit curve upward a little bit. That's not a big deal. My light source is about to get eaten by the piece, so let's find it. There it is. Okay. So 4 corner pieces will work fine. And there should be enough room to fight up here. There's going to be a Storm Atronach spawning. The idea is that there's going to be platforms leading out toward the edge of the room right here. And Storm Atronachs are going to spawn there when you reach that particular level. And they're going to come toward the player. You can fight them or you can run. And then at the top, there's going to be another spawn, but it's kind of an ambush. A lightning bolt comes down, and right in front of you, Storm Atronach, which you kind of have to fight because it's blocking your path. And the idea is, on these platforms, on the outside edge here, there's going to be some kind of relic or piece of geometry that will be recognizable, and then there's also going to be one at the top. So as you ascend to the final platform, you see the geometry, and it kind of warns the player that they're about to get ambushed. Just keeping a common theme like that helps the player not feel an unfair advantage, and still allows you to keep the difficulty up. So we need to add some more stairs. We can simply resize this if we want. Turn the snapping off. Let's see how tall it is. It's pretty tall, but we need the bottom to reach, which means we're not going to quite get there like this. In fact, if we zoom in, I guess it's okay. You want to be careful if you're resizing pieces a lot to make sure that the texture quality is about the same as the surrounding unresized area. So this looks okay. but it doesn't fix the issue that the player can't get to where they need to go. So if we add this, create more stairs, you just want to make sure that you're not flickering, or you don't have an odd section like that. So we'll hide that, and there we go. That should be enough. Let's copy this piece, and we'll add it right here. Oops. What did I do? All right. Okay. So to avoid the player being frustrated at hitting a dead end, I think I'll add like a piece of treasure or something like that behind the staircases in case you happen to go the wrong way. You have to backtrack. Backtracking in game sucks, and you always want to avoid it, or at least make it. You just want to mitigate the effects of it. So, for example, if this dungeon, this is a bit of a sidebar, I guess. If this dungeon is a linear thing, and this were the end of the dungeon right here, in order to exit, you had to go back through all the rest of the dungeon. What you'd want to do is add little Easter eggs that you can only see by going the opposite direction. So let's say you had a treasure chest behind this pillar that you normally wouldn't see when you're going down the first time. Or you add something above the door, going the opposite direction. Something like that. Or maybe even on your way back you can add triggers that will spawn new things. Like, for example, a trap that causes a ceiling to open up or the floor to break in front of you. Just give you an alternate path back the way you came to negate the player intense boredom. Alright, so we have this basic shape right here. It's going to be kind of like a... Hang on, I need to cough. Excuse me. It's going to be full of machinery, just because I feel like that seems to work well with the lightning theme. We're going to have some pipes and some moving parts, almost like it's a living, breathing machine god that you're ascending. Something like that. That'll be part of the theme of reality breaking away that I'm trying to keep with this dungeon. And it'll also make sense with the lightning theme. So, we've got the basic structure. Now we need to add the platforms. I feel like they should go out to either side to use this unused space, and because we need to keep this open for the platform leading to the end. So we probably need to move the stairs. Let's go ahead and do that now. We just need to rotate them. Okay, that's good. So over here, this can reach off to the left, and then this right here can reach off to the right. That's good. Just checking out the stream. I think something went wrong. Okay, that's better. Alright, so let's make these platforms. I really like the Dwemer kit because it's got a lot of big, chunky pieces that flow well together, and you can make a lot of stuff out of them. The Nordic kit has a lot of specialized and small pieces, things that only work well with certain other folders in the kit, basically. Like you have entire folders dedicated toward creating a room with a pit in it, or a room with wooden stairs only, and just a lot of specific pieces that you need lots of knowledge and just a lot of experience using the kit in order to put them together, because they don't fit well with a lot of other pieces. Dwemer is different. Let's find me some platforms. I need to turn off Efflux. Okay, so it's in Facade. And it's a bridge. Okay, here we go. This is what I'm looking for. We're going to turn on snapping while I build it, and then we'll turn off snapping and then reposition it so I don't have this little hump here. Let's see, it might be cool to have a curve. Curve just looks less natural than the straight. But we need to turn it so you're still going basically this way. There, that looks good. I believe these are supposed to snap together in a way that they don't flicker like that, but we can individually move them. In fact, I can just do that now. I might even be able to do something really weird and have them curve as a ramp. There we go, this is what I'm looking for. Doesn't quite work with covering the distance though, unless you move it like this. There we go, that looks nice. So that goes clockwise, this one goes counterclockwise. And you can just, without snapping, you can use snapping with angles to make sure that the angles are right, and then unsnap the positioning to make sure that you're not flickering. Let's go really close, and we look good. So we're still moving up. I'll want to put a pillar or something holding this up. Might even be able to go with the floating rocks theme again and have the pillar start breaking toward the bottom, as if it once was held up by a pillar, but gravity is fucked up and it's being held together simply by Oblivion's laws of physics. Okay, so we've got this right here. Rather than searching for what the platform was called, let's just rip it straight out of this room. I think it was a tower partition or something like that. Tower spacer, okay. Let's change it to not have snow on it. And we can make it a little smaller. Then position it. There we go. Having a little step is okay, but you don't want it to be too much that the character is getting hung up on it. Okay, so perhaps, just so we don't have this like frisbee thrown into the wall, we can actually have a tower structure underneath it, and then this support for this will be a pillar that's breaking apart and then held in midair by weird gravity. And then we can simply copy paste to the other side. So we have the ground level, we have this upper level. Oh, I see here in my concept that I made a little drawing. This actually had 4 levels, so there are 2 little sidebars here. So I'll have to make this an offshoot from the stairs. That's not so bad. Although, it is a little weird that this is kind of jutting out into the space that the player is going to be going up. It would be better if these switch positions. Let's turn this into a clockwise one. Rotate it. There we go. That's much better. Okay. Now, interestingly, there's more space on the right side. Oh, no, it's just because we're going from a different point here. So we'll have to make this... this is interesting. So we have a problem. This platform isn't going to be big enough to house the Atronach. Actually, it might. Let's do the old Alvor test. Except instead of using Alvor to test human size, we'll just use a Storm Atronach. Oh, okay. Alright, that's plenty big enough. And really, the Atronach is going to start pathing toward the player as soon as it spawns. So you might end up fighting it on the ramp anyway, so small size for player maneuverability is not as big a concern as I thought. So this will work. I just need to make sure that player's not getting hung up on this right here. If I can't figure it out, I just found out that there are trigger boxes that you can use, or not triggers, they're collision boxes. They're invisible, but you place them in the game world to ease the player stepping over things. So it basically acts as an invisible ramp. So if I have this going up, like right here, this step would stop players and followers and enemies from moving up to it. But you add this trigger box, you just rotate it so it's at a slant, and then the player will, invisibly walk on it to get to the platform. It's actually pretty neat. It's incredibly simple. I don't know why I'm amazed by this, but, whatever. So I still want this to jut out a little bit more, if I can. So I might end up actually doing that. Okay. Let's see if I can get it. That's not what I want. Okay. So we have multi-bound data in here. Oh no, it's not multi-bound data, it's a collision layer. And you can make it a certain type. I don't know how to do that, so... Let's go to where I saw it. Alright, Bleak Falls Barrow. It's in here. Here we go. It's a collision marker. And you inspect this. And the primitive type, here we go. This is what I couldn't access before, but Stair Helper, that's what it's called. So we'll just copy that bitch. take it over here, paste it, and we just have to rotate it until it's in line with where I want the player to walk. That's complicated, and it doesn't look good, but I'm going to leave it there so I know to mess with it later. Okay. Next, I'll get started making the tower. Towers are big pieces, so that it shouldn't take long to make it as soon as I find the piece that I need. Like, for example, this is a complete tower on all sides for one height. And there are lots of different heights you can choose from. So we have this right here. We're going to need a height of 2 at least. There we go. That already looks good. I think there's a seam right here though, so let's go in and take a look. Nope, it's perfect. Just want to make sure it's centered. It's really easy to mess that up. And it's not quite centered, so let's move it. Well, you know what? Because this isn't snapped to the world, I have to make this my snap target. Now this should snap when I move it. Or at least it would if the movement wasn't 128. So let's change my snap movement to 32 again so I can fine tune it. There we go. Just want to make sure it looks good on all sides so it looks believable like it would have been there. I feel like it's closer on this edge than this, so let's try and move it forward. Okay, that looks perfect. And make sure it reaches all the way to the bottom. It does not. But that's okay, I can put rocks around here. I was planning on doing that anyway just because you don't want to have this flat rock geometry wall. It needs to be filled in with pillars and stuff like that. So, now that I know that that works, let's make my snap target this platform. Put the tower there. Make sure it's the correct height. And place it in the center. Just got to rotate to make sure it's centered. Okay, that looks good. So it looks believable that this big platform here is held up. And then these walkways right here, let's see, we'll find a piece of a pillar. I want to have some distinct visual elements that the player can get familiar with, that carry over from room to room, and that one of those is this pillar right here from Skyhaven Temple. I just really like it. It's nicely detailed and everything. So I'm going to take that. We're going to stick it over here. And I'm going to look at the underside to see if there is an underside. There is not. So if it's breaking, unless I want to fill in that seam, that gap right here with rocks and stuff, which I suppose I could do, it needs to be in the ground and then breaking toward the top. Basically, the effect that I want to achieve is what I have in my first cell of this dungeon. Right here. So we have some pillars that are intact, then some that are leaning, and then some that appear to be breaking apart and held in midair. We want that. Again, we're going with the theme of realities breaking apart and you're kind of descending into oblivion. So this big structure being held up by a small pillar like this doesn't really work, so let's make it a little bit bigger. The texture is still good enough, I think, that when you enlarge it, it doesn't look too faded, especially against this floor, which is actually a ceiling and meant to not be viewed too closely by the player anyway, so it still looks good. Then we can lower it a bit, and then we'll add rocks and stuff to make it appear like it's being held up by a gravitational anomaly or something like that. So in order to get the rocks to stay up, you have to use trap rocks because they're actually modeled on all sides. Most of the rocks in the game are not just to save triangles, but these actually have the whole model built. And then you simply mark it as don't havoc settle. And I think I went a step further, and just to be sure, because sometimes I still do fall, you add the script default disable havoc on load. Because before I added that, occasionally when you load into the cell, they still drop to the ground. But this seems to prevent it consistently. I like to hand edit all the details and everything, but just for the sake of getting the visuals right at a concept level, making sure that it actually looks okay and it makes sense, I'll just copy and paste some things. Okay, looks kind of neat. You can see it as you're walking around the corner. All these rocks that are just floating there. We'll need to make the top of this pillar look more ruined because as it is now, it's just kind of like a flat, complete pillar that looks fine, just not at the correct height. So we'll have to cover the top of it with rocks and ruined bits and shit like that. So let's go here and... Oh, you know what? I did make a special light for this. Again, keeping with the visual theme of familiarity and letting the player get used to certain things and building expectations so you know when to break them. I made a color coding. Purple equals gravitational anomaly. So it's pretty bright, but you can see that it just makes the rocks look really cool and it moves around a bunch. And the only thing you can really see the lights reflected on is the underside of this, which you might be able to see a little bit of it coming around the corner, but in order to make the shadows really visible, you have to make the lights radius much bigger and shift it around toward the top here. And we'll see if that actually makes the shadows visible. Okay, it does. Geez, the radius has to be huge though. Almost so big that you can't really see it until you're right on top of it anyway because of how shadow lights fade in. It looks cool though, for sure. I'll leave it like that just so I don't forget to mess with that. Yeah, that looks neat. You can move around, like small manipulation of the position of the light changes where the shadows go a lot. So if you have like one blob of a shadow here that doesn't work, or you have seams that are popping in, you can just move it a little bit. It's really important to get to know how the shadows work like that if you use Dwemer kits, because the light sources in the Dwemer kit have lots of tiny small holes in them, like metal grates. Um, the walls are like prison bars that have slats so you can see light through. There are lanterns that have odd shapes and stuff like that built into them. So if you actually have your light source in those pieces, like you probably should to make them believable, the shadows will definitely change depending on minute modifications to the position of it. For example, I'm going to have leading up the stairs, let's see, let's reduce this radius right here, some lanterns, because it just makes sense. We'll have some lanterns, and maybe those lanterns can be attracting some of the lightning I'm going to have. That'll look cool. So let's go and find us some clutter in the Dwemer dungeon. I think it's called a floor lamp. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try lamp floor. And lamp. There we go. Dwemer floor lantern. Okay. And there's an on version. Just has a little flame right there. The flame isn't a light source itself. It just makes it look convincing. So let's position this. And then you take the light and you actually stick it in there. And it makes a really cool pattern on the floor like that. You just have to make sure it's not the center of the light source isn't inside a piece of geometry, or else you get, you know, weird stuff like that. So yeah, looks really cool. I think this light moves around a bit too much. Yeah, it does. Okay, so let's make a light source that doesn't move. I think most of the light sources that move or shift back and forth by default are called bounce lights. So we'll pick a light that isn't bouncing, but does have a shadow. This is something I like to bitch about a lot when I play other people's levels, is people don't use shadow lights enough. People will just be okay with taking just a plain flat light source, and they'll even have a actual source for it, but it's just this flat lighting. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't create any shadows or cool visual details like that. So you want to add a shadow lighting. Add a shadow lighting. My grammar done good. I think there are some Dwemer lights that are the correct color for this green right here to blend in, and they look like they fit, like they were made for it. But rather than green, I might go with a stark white instead, because I think that's the color of the light that lightning spells in the game puts out. It might actually be purple, come to think of it. It's either white or purple, I'm pretty sure. So whatever that turns out to be, I'll test this, obviously. I'll go ahead with that color of light. So I got some research. I haven't played Skyrim in a long time, just made stuff. But this looks cool. Just a detail that you can see coming around the corner. It'd be cool if this was on the walls, so let's extend the radius a little bit. Raise it up. No, raising it up shrinks it, so let's move it down like that. There we go. Just adding the shape to the wall right there. The thing with shadow lights is that you can only have 4 in a scene. So the other lights that are on this right here, this structure, they're going to have to be non-shadow casting, or at least I should make room for most of them to be. And also the thing you have to keep in consideration is that these are very big pieces, and in terms of performance, each piece can only be affected by a certain number of lights. So if you have like a whole ton of even non-shadow casting lights, it'll still cause some of them to flicker or simply not work. So I have to be very judicious where I put my lights and how lit up this place in general is. Since I'm going to be having lightning shooting everywhere onto this thing, it would be okay if some of the lights flicker, because that effect is going to be there anyway. But I want to be intentional and only brief, and only when the lightning strikes. So I need to make the rest of this while using as few light sources as possible. It's a good idea to get into a habit of doing that anyway, just being judicious with your use of lights, because you never know when the player's going to have followers that have a torch, or the player has a torch, and you have multiple other light sources coming in from areas you don't or places you don't expect. Okay, so here's my to-do list, because I'm just about done streaming for tonight. I was just going to go for about an hour. Need to add more light sources where they're needed, so I might add one on the opposite corner here, and then one at the top, and then I'll be done with that. I need to add machine parts to the sides to make this whole thing animated, look like a living, breathing machine that you're ascending. I'll add the encounters. Need to add the patrol pathing in case they don't notice the player right away. I want them to come down off the platform. And then I need to obviously make the ramp leading up to the exit. And after that, pillars and details and stuff to fill in the rocky walls. And then special effects. So, but the thing is, a lot of that, it's just a lot of busy work and stuff that isn't pleasant to watch or listen to at all. At least doing this, starting off the rough concept and just getting the basic shapes of things down, I can explain why I do some of the broader concepts and stuff like that. Ideas behind why I do the things that I do, instead of just watching me look at menus. For example, this thing, I could explain for maybe 20 minutes how or why I made this room, but it took me probably 2 hours to actually make it from start to finish. And during that time, I'm mainly just positioning, the icy walls, looking for seams, adding the effects, hitting Control F to switch between dozens and dozens of effects until I finally settle on one that looks right. Stuff that isn't conducive to intelligent listening. Just a lot of schlock. But that's it for now. If you watched, thanks. I appreciate your time. And have a good night.